So with the compositional stuff out the way, let's talk a little bit about the sound design, synthesis, and the processing. And we're going to start, of course, with the main synth sound. And I spent a long time trying to get the sound to be pretty much perfect. I've seen a few other tutorials out there trying to recreate this sound, and they just weren't as close as I like them to be for that specific synth sound. And I've done 2 variations of the sound here, because I know a lot of you out there don't have potentially Diva and some of the plugins that I end up using. So I have made 2 versions of this sound, one inside of Diva with all the extra plugins and things like that, and then one inside of Serum, which is just a solely contained Serum patch. So if you just have Serum, then you can use this sound as well. They are slightly different though, and I have spent a lot more time on the Diva version just to let you know. So let's just have a listen again to those main chords. And the big thing about this sound is that it straight away, it just sounded like it had that analog charm. It has a slightly wonky feel to the pitch. The pitch does move up and down very slightly in the track. It also has a lot of detuning and other elements going on. And to be honest, the sound might have been made in Serum, I don't know, but it does sound a lot like an analog synthesizer. And so that's why I went straight to Diva. And inside Diva here, I'm using the Moog oscillators on the left and the mixer as well. But I ended up using the Cascade filter in the middle here, which I think is the Roland, the Jupiter 6 or the Juno 60 filter type. So the big thing about Diva is it emulates the original filter types and the oscillators from these classic vintage synthesizers. In analog circuits, if you bump the level up a little bit too much, you'll start to distort the signal. In my oscillators here, I've got all of them set to saw waves. All 3 are being used, but the first 2 have been turned on into sync mode. And really this is just like inside of Serum, turning down the random phase so that both of the oscillators are in perfect sync. They're in complete phase with each other. It's not exactly the same as that, but that's how you could recreate it inside of Serum. And the reason I did this is actually just to get more volume to be pushed into the filter on the right here, because the more we push the oscillators, the more volume that goes into the filter, the more distortion we'll get. And that's how we can get that really nice, bright, distorted but warm tone. If I turn second oscillator off here, so this is off. That's what the first 2 oscillators are doing. And then the third one I have turned on, but it's just got a very slight amount of detune. You can see it's the top there, it says 0.09, which is 9 cents above the original pitch. And again, if we turn that off, not only is it adding a little bit of volume, but it's adding that very subtle movement, that kind of shimmery, shiny movement that you get from detuning to oscillators. The next thing we have, I added a little bit of white noise as well. Just gives it some extra brightness, but really the main part of this synth is the filter. So the filter here, I've got the cutoff set quite low, and we've got envelope 2 affecting that filter cutoff. This is envelope 2 down here in the bottom right hand corner. Just for example's sake, if we turn this all the way up, you can hear it's very bright. As we bring it down, you'll hit this nice sweet spot. The cutoff is incredibly low here. If I turn off the envelope modulation, you can hear it's basically filtering out the whole of the signal there, apart from the really low notes. And the envelope 2 is doing a lot to bring that up and down. And that's how we get that really kind of nice tail to the sound. that really quick descent of the cutoff down to that really low setting. It also adds a tiny bit of detuning very close to the end. Again, the filters inside of Diva are doing magic really here on the sound. So we've got a lot of envelope movement. There is no resonance on this sound here. It kind of does sound like the synth stuffs have some resonance, but when we set this cutoff so low, you can kind of hear what sounds a little bit like a resonance sweep in the filter, but it's just the way the filter sounds basically. So that's why the resonance is off here. If we turn it up a little bit, doesn't sound too bad. I just found though, when I added my processing later on, it became a little bit too bright overall. So that's why that's off. And we've actually got no keyboard tracking on here at the moment. That's pretty important just for the overall tone of the sound. It's going to mean that the lower notes are going to have more upper harmonics. It's going to make the sound a little bit thicker overall. Envelope wise, envelope 1, which is our volume, we've got no attack on this and a kind of medium-ish decay. The envelope 2 has got a very short attack, and it's creating that nice bend at the beginning with quite a fast decay too. And you'll hear if I turn this attack off, kind of sounds right in a way, but when you bring this up to, I think it was 23, you get that really nice effect at the beginning, that like wob effect. And I've also set this to be the digital envelope with the C, the curve turned on. This just adds a slight S shape to the envelope that you'll see on the screen now, instead of it just being a linear envelope, which does help with that too. The big problem that I was having for ages is that from what I could tell originally, Diva doesn't have any way of making the sound stereo. And it's how all these original synths work. They were generally all mono. You had to apply chorus and other effects afterwards to make them stereo. When you applied a chorus to everything to make it wide, you could hear there was just a little bit too much movement. You get all the kind of phasing artifacts that we can really hear. If I go into my main track, I have this plugin set up here, this utility, and then it inverts the phase of the left channel. We combine that left and right channel, make them mono, which will basically allow you to listen to just the side band of frequencies in our sound. So you can hear when we listen to that side band, it's pretty clean overall. We've not got a lot of movement. It sounds very close to the original synth. If I just turn this trick off that I'm going to show you in a minute, and we instead just applied something like a chorus to our sound there. This is without the little Diva trick and with the chorus. You can already start to hear the sound coming through, but you especially hear it when we turn this plugin back on again. So it just wasn't good enough for the sound in the track. And I believe the reason why is because of the unison feature, probably in Serum or in a similar sound to that. Because I did try out other plugins like Wider as well, which just didn't have that same power. So that's why I was actually just searching through the manual inside of Diva. And at the end, there's a little section with tricks. And one of them was a stereo effect. The other thing I've done inside of Diva here in the main tab is I've turned on the stack from 1, which is the original, to 2. It's just going to stack another version of the synth on top of the one you've got already, or the oscillators at least anyway. So when we play 3 notes, for example, in our chords, it's going to play 6 through all of the 3 oscillators as well, and we get that really nice thick sound. And by doing that, we can actually also go over to the amplifier and pan. In the pan mod, we want to choose stack index. Then we're going to turn the dial all the way up. And what it will do is it'll take each of those stacks and it'll pan them to the left and the right side. So now we've got one of those copies panned to the left channel and another one of them panned to the right. And if you listen to it now, and then before, honestly, I'd spent so long on this. This was like a massive revelation to getting that exact same sound. I also just want to quickly go through the Serum version of this. Again, there is only LFO tool on this track because it's just doing the sidechain compression. And if you look at this, I've kind of got a similar-ish setup as I did inside of Diva, where we've got one oscillator A. I've set it to the Juno, again, analog synth, all that. But the unison's been turned up to 8. and I've got the detune relatively high. You see it's a little bit 0.14 there. I've also added in a second oscillator with no unison, and I've just again boosted the volume a little bit for that extra distortion, but also for some more stability in my sound. A little bit of noise, again, Juno 106 high pass, quite low though. If I turn the filter off, and the effects of course as well. Filter is the MG Low 18, and again we've got that wide range on the cutoff here. I do have a tiny bit of resonance on here, 8%. I've actually got no drive here at this point because I'm doing something slightly different to achieve a similar result as the sound. The cutoff's being modulated by envelope 2, as you can see here, again with that slight attack there, 27 millisecond attack. It's about 700 millisecond decay I found was like the sweet spot for this. And then I've also bent the attack in a very small amount just by dragging that. And again, if you want to look through this patch, you don't have to follow along in the video. The preset will be in the description below, so you can download it there. Processing wise, I started off with a chorus, but this chorus is interesting because it's mimicking what I've done on the Diva side, which I'll come back to in a second. But if I turn the mix all the way up, I've actually got it so that I've switched from low pass filter to high pass filter by clicking on this final dial, and I brought this up very, very high, 1800 Hertz. Again, I found with a chorus when I put this on the track, it got too much of that movement, but to give it that extra movement in the higher frequencies, that kind of shimmery, noisy effect, I just thought I'd layer this in, again at 50% dry wet. I then got a compressor, which is a very fast attack and a fast release. It's really just to clamp down on any very, very loud jumps in volume. And it means that when we put it now into the distortion afterwards, it's going to help give it a more even, distorted feel. Now, distortion-wise, played around with a few different settings, but I found that the soft clip was the best one. But I've also got the filter turned on to pre, and it's just rolling off some of the lowest frequencies, because when I had it set to off, some of those lower frequencies really just started to hit the distortion quite heavily. So by just taking them slightly out, it's going to help. And it's also going to help with our sub bass that we'll look at in a minute. I didn't end up actually using the filter over here, and then I've just added in an EQ finally just to add a high-end boost. 3000, 5.9. on the high shelf setting there. And again, the idea with this is so that everything is contained within Serum, so you don't have to worry about adding extra presets. They're not going to sound exactly the same. Let's have a listen to them both in the track. And so we'll start with Diva at the top here, and I'm going to jump back and forth. Just watch these two activation switches jump in between the two. And they do sound very close. I do think that the original sound was probably made in something like Serum. I feel like Diva just has a little bit of extra character, which is the reason why you would pick Diva over Serum. It just sounds a little bit more interesting, especially the filters sweeping up and down very quick. It just sounds really, really good. Serum, of course, has much more finer control modulation capabilities. That means you can make subtle variations. Now, looking at the processing, start from the beginning. Got a short Valhalla room on at the beginning, which is a little bit odd. It just sounded like in the track there was just this sense of like width first of all, but also a very short ambience in the background. So this is what it sounds like. And I've set this up with a very short decay, but the key thing with this is setting the depth to 0 so you get all of the early reflections instead of the long tail like that. And then I've just blended this back in. I think it was about 20%. tiniest difference between the two. Then I've got a limiter on here controlling some of the peaks. And you can see I've set this new Ableton limiter, which is really nice, to the soft clip setting. So it is limiting my sound, but it's also distorting it at the same time, which is kind of what I wanted. It's pretty much perfect for this type of sound. I've got the high passed chorus again. Which is a lot more effective on this Diva version here. And then I've got my distortion. So I've used a free plugin here called Saturation Knob by Softtube. Saturation type set to neutral, and then I'm distorting quite heavily in this one. And then I've done some serial distortion here where we've got just two of the same distortions on, one after another. I set this one to be a little bit lower, and putting two distortions in series like this, one after another, will give you a slightly different tone to just using one. So this is what this one is doing. Pro Q3 is doing kind of like a tilt EQ here, reducing some of the low frequencies and boosting some of the higher frequencies around like the presence region. Then I've got a compressor, a little bit of a longer attack on this because I want to really bring back a little bit of the wob, the kind of volume change from the beginning. I set the attack to be 34 milliseconds, and if I bring the threshold down here, you can hear the pop or the kind of wob that cuts through before the compressor is applied. And I'm not doing a lot of that, only 3 decibels, but and then we've got some sidechain. I've got it only set to like just under halfway here, all been set up to the kick drum. And if you want to learn about sidechain compression, I have a full tutorial which will be in the card on one of these two sides in the top right of the video. Now, another thing that's going on that really helps emphasize this synth is automation. First ones you can see that are quite obvious are the saturation knobs here have been automated to turn on and off. Same with the LFO tool as well. And this is just for like the build-up sections here. You can see in this beginning bit, just so you get a nicer, cleaner sound in the beginning. But the other automation that is going on is inside of Diva. So I've automated 3 parameters, as you can see here. And the frequency and the frequency mod depth, the envelope to amount, are kind of controlling the build-up really here. You can see the frequency mod depth slowly increasing. To brighten up the sound, but also increase the kind of dynamic range of the wob at the beginning. And then the frequency kind of doing the same thing in this section, but leading to the drop there, which is very bright. But the other thing that's been automated, which is a bit more interesting, is the decay on the envelope too. So this is the decay that's controlling our filter, this one here. And in the build up, you can see there are slightly different lengths. This one's quite short over here. It builds up to the end. You get those nice cascading notes at the end of that section. In here, it's a little bit higher than it was before. And then in the drop, it shortens quite a lot. Then we go to this section here, and this is where the decay just drops down, so you get a nice change. The those two just slightly shorter notes, which helps just add a little bit of variation. It's just the story of this song is the variation is the key thing. And this is what we end up with.